We are getting closer and closer and closer to the Jesus's cross and the crucifixion of Jesus. And we're starting off. There's this old biblical prophet that sums up the gospel pretty well. And he basically says something like this: that is better for you that one man should die for the people than the whole nation should perish. Right? And that's kind of like a good summation of the gospel there. Right? Like that this is what Lent and Easter are all about, that we should not perish, but Jesus dies for us. Like that's what we're building up to and what we're working on here. So so we're continuing with our sermon series called Comfort. And what the whole idea behind this sermon series is last Good Friday we were watching that video that I had for the Good Friday service, and I realized, oh my goodness, this whole bit in the Gospel of John, in between the Last Supper and the feet washing and Jesus being arrested, which is like 4 chapters, it takes a while to read through it, is meant to, in the midst of all of the tension that everyone is feeling, is meant to bring comfort. And there's so much tension there. I mean, Peter, he says, I will even die for you, Jesus. You don't say that when, at your birthday party when everyone's having a fun time. Someone doesn't yell out, I would even die for you, right? Like that, you can tell there's tension there. And Jesus goes, Peter, will you? Will you really die for me? Because I tell you the truth, Peter, even before the rooster crows, before the morning, you are going to deny me 3 times, right? And then he keeps on going, and this is the comfort. You're going to deny me 3 times, but let not your heart be troubled. You trust God, trust also in me. In this whole section in between the Last Supper, which is just mere hours, and the arrest of Jesus, is meant to bring comfort, and meant to bring us comfort too. So we're getting towards the end of it. We're in the latter part of chapter 16 here. Next week is Palm Sunday, and it's called the High Priestly Prayer. We're looking at that and connected to the Palm Sunday stuff. But this week, if you remember what we talked about last week, we talked about the man born blind, and the disciples were confused. Jesus is using all of these confusing statements, and they're getting tired of it. They're like, we don't understand what you're saying, Jesus. Just talk to us plainly. And he finally does, right? He finally does. So he says, no, the Father himself loves you because you have loved me and believed that I came from God. And the disciples are super excited about this. They're like, oh, now you're speaking clearly. You're no longer using figures of speech. We know that you know all things, and that makes us believe that you came from God. They're like, glory be. Oh, thank you, Jesus, that you are finally doing this to us. Get ready. Get ready, everybody. This one is another one that's a little thicker than most of the sermons, all of that. There's a lot to chew on, but it's good. It's good. And so, at least, hopefully it's good. It all depends on how it's dealt by me, right? Like all that stuff. So they're all excited about this. Then Jesus continues talking. And you can tell that this slide is important because there are things that are highlighted on it, right? He goes, a time is coming, and in fact, is already here, when you will be scattered. Scattered. Each to your own home. You will leave me all alone, yet I'm not alone. The Father is with me. Right? So that's, and we understand this. We understand this in the story of Jesus. Jesus is basically left all alone on the cross. Like everyone else, one of the disciples that actually stayed around Jesus, Peter, denies him publicly, right? Like everyone else runs away, and even after the crucifixion and the resurrection, they're all still hiding away from everybody else in that upper room. But Jesus continues. But I have told you these things so that in me you might have peace. Because in this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Like this is the idea, that you will be scattered. Like you're going to feel this scattering, all of this stuff. But he's saying that I'm still bringing you peace because I have overcome the world. And when I think about all of these things, what we've been doing in this sermon series has been going back. I think John, as he's writing this comfort section in there, he keeps going back to previous stories. Last week we looked at the man born blind, and the next big story after that is Lazarus. You guys are familiar with Lazarus, right? Lazarus is the story where Jesus' friend, Jesus has a few friends. He's got Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, and Lazarus is dying, right? And Jesus in chapter 16, he's so excited that the disciples are excited that he's speaking plainly, that they're worried about being scattered. But we see this scattering in Lazarus, because oftentimes when we face death and hurt, it can make us feel scattered, right? But Jesus unifies us in that life. So the story of Lazarus. Jesus is doing Jesus-y things, he's going around teaching, doing all that stuff. And then someone comes up and is like, hey, your friend Lazarus, he's sick and dying. Why don't you come? And the whole implication is, why don't you come, Messiah, and heal him? Quit being lazy about all this. Chop, chop. Let's heal your friend, And so he's like, all right. And he starts coming there. Well, while he's on the path, it's come to find out that his friend Lazarus has died. In fact, he's been dead now for 4 days. And this story, this story in the Gospel of John is meant to be kind of like a wink to the future of Jesus. Like that Jesus is going to raise Lazarus from the dead, just like he's going to rise from the dead, just like he's going to raise us all from the dead. It's a wink at us towards the future, but it doesn't stop the pain that's happening now. And this story is incredibly important. We really dived deep into Lazarus on Wednesday service 2 weeks ago. If you want to watch that one, go for it. I encourage it. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about what we talked about there. But it's called Death to Life on that one. So it's on the website. But Jesus, he comes, and Mary and Martha, Lazarus's sisters, and Jesus' friends, they come up to Jesus and they beat on his chest. They're like, if you had only been here. And they go up to the tomb, and all of this emotion is there, and it says that Jesus weeps. I think that's one of the most important individual verses in the entire Bible. Because a lot of times we have this vision of Jesus that is just he's just this cosmic power, kind of unfeeling, you be healed, like cosmic Oprah or something like that, right? That's that he is just doing all these things but unfeeling. And when he's weeping with his friends at the loss of his friend, you can see in that moment that Jesus weeps with us. Even though Jesus is a beacon of hope, life, and health, and hope for a future, in the midst of our pains that we have today, that he weeps with us. And that's good. That's good. He also laughs with us. Like Jesus is with us in all of this stuff that's going on here. But he after he cries, he goes to the tomb. And what happens, and it's recorded in chapter 11, verse 41, and he goes, roll away the stone. Ooh, this sounds familiar, right? Take away the stone. And Jesus looked up and he prays to God, basically for the benefit of everyone around him. It says that God is listening. And when he had prayed all these things, he cried out with a loud voice. It says, he goes, Lazarus, come on out of there. And Lazarus comes out looking like a mummy, wrapped head to toe in all of these grave clothes, right? All these linens that are wrapped around him. And Jesus says, unbind him and let him go. Take the grave clothes off of him. This is what we're talking about. This is this plain mission of God, that God is about death to life. He's about bringing us together rather than scattering us in the death, because that feeling of being scattered in death is one that we feel a lot. That when true struggle comes onto us, we can feel dispersed. We can feel not put together. We can feel on the outside when we deal with it. But yet Jesus is saying, take the grave clothes off. Death has no hold. That Jesus is life. So in this story then, right after this happens, where everyone's like amazed that Lazarus is like walking and talking around and eating food and all that stuff, we then get to see the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin and all that. How do you think they handle this? Are they like, oh, I didn't know he could raise people from the dead. Well, I declare, I guess we should follow him, right? Is that what they say? Like, no, they're not into that at all. And so the chief priests and the Pharisees, they call a meeting of the Sanhedrin. Now, when you picture this, at least this is what I picture in my mind. It's like, I'm looking at the average age in the room. I was going to do like an Austin Powers Dr. Evil layer idea going on, but we may have to go to like Roger Moore, James Bond villains, right? Like over there. Oh, what were those curled eyes for there, Nancy? But like, just like those old Bond villains or Dr. Evil or something like that, like these layers about all that stuff. We need to put laser beams on the sharks. Like that's like they all like pull it, you can imagine like everything is like, like 2,000 years ago, Middle East, and the Sanhedrin meets, and it's all like white and modern in there, around their tables. Like, oh, how do we do it? They're like, what are we accomplishing, right? Like here's this man performing all of these amazing signs. Like if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And if everyone believes in him, then the Romans are going to take away both our temple and our nation. Here's what I love about this statement. We're getting into an election year. You hear this still today. They're trying to take the country away from us, right? It's all this culture war stuff, right? We've been saying it for 2,000 years. Stop it. It's fine. You'll be all right. All right, I'll get off the high horse. But they've been saying it for years, and they're worried about Jesus taking everything away from them, which is funny because Jesus has the same warning for them, and it kind of is taken all away from them in 66 when the temple falls and all that stuff. But Jesus is saying, your guys scattering and searching for power is what does it, right? And so they're like, he's going to take everything away from us. And what we see in here is that even though Jesus is bringing light and life to people, even though he is arguably bringing this amazing news to all of this, these Pharisees, these Sanhedrin, these guys have curled in on themselves. That's how we define sin around here. It's where we curl in on ourselves, that they have curled in on themselves so much that they can't see light anymore. They're just so enveloped in everything that's just going on around them that they can't see anymore, right? And we see this all the time. That when we curl in our own selves, we allow sin to reign in our own lives, that often that we will push people aside. We'll push people out, right? It's like, oh, this is just good for me. And we'll push people farther and farther. We'll scatter people away of ourselves. We'll see that our own selves can feel this way. What are the ways that we have been selfish and have pushed people away? I mean, I pick on it constantly, but the whole politics thing, where we're like, oh, that person didn't vote like I wanted them to, banished from my life, like scattering people away. That's curling in. That's not bringing people in there, right? We do this all the time in so many things. Like I hear it in church stuff too. It's like, I want the pastor to wear purple socks in Lent. That's like, I picked something that no one does. Let's see, what I have National Youth Gathering socks on right now. That's how on brand I am. It has nothing to do that my room is dark so I don't wake Coley and pick socks willy-nilly out of her drawer, right? It has nothing to do with that. But we curl in on ourselves and want our own ways so often. We can see where these guys are doing that there, and we become blind and we end up scattering these people around us. Then Caiaphas begins to talk, and he's the high priest. And whenever, like the way Caiaphas is presented in the scriptures, is that whenever you see him, you should have this internal monologue that's like, boo, Caiaphas. Like that's, like, and Caiaphas is the guy who ends up later actually sending Jesus to Pilate to be crucified. And Caiaphas says this. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. He goes, you all know nothing. Like you could tell he's like pulling his hair out. Like that. Do you not realize that it's better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation to perish? Oh, that's kind of weird. That's what I quoted at the very beginning of the sermon here, right? That I was actually quoting Caiaphas there. I don't know how I feel about that, right? Like, and this is what he ended up saying there. He didn't say this on his own, but as the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and to make them one. Now, here's what I love, all right? Love this so much. John, the gospel writer, inspired by the Spirit, is being cheeky with us here, right? Because what does this sound like? This is the most gospel phrase that ever gospeled in its life, right? That Jesus would die for us all to bring us all together, right? That's what that phrase is, right? And the gospel writer is saying, hey, look, here's this man who's like evil personified, right? Who's so curled in on himself that he's so curled he can't see light at all, and he's mad as I can't use that word in this company. He's mad as stink that Jesus is causing this light to be into the world, and he's just like, don't you know that we just need to kill him, right? And he actually prophesied that if Jesus died, it would benefit the whole people of God and bring them in right there. Like John, the gospel writer's being cheeky with us. He's like, do you see what's happening here? That Jesus, and this is mere verses after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. You're talking 20 seconds of reading from Jesus coming out, but Lazarus coming out, and to get the grave clothes off of him, he's saying this. And basically, the way John is telling this story is that Jesus, who could take the dead and make them breathe again, that Jesus, who is able to move, like to animate those dry bones once again, to take that darkness and hurt and pain that was in that, right? That he's able to take that darkness, hurt, and pain, that curled inness, that vileness from the mind of Caiaphas, and all of those things, like that he is able to take that and turn it into good. Do you hear what's being said here? Like, get it. John is being cheeky. And he is saying that the most evil thing in this narrative, Caiaphas, who's masquerading as an angel of light, as a priest who wears like nice white robes and talks in front of people and all of that stuff, you know? Like that Jesus, just as he raised Lazarus from the dead, is bringing life to the dead words of Caiaphas. That is what he's doing. That this is the gospel, that Jesus is dying for us. He is dying for us. And you, sinners in this room, you dirty, nasty sinners, are you any worse than Caiaphas? Your words that have curled in on themselves, that have caused divisions, your actions that have brought death rather than goodness, your sin, which is curled into all around us. Are you any worse than this? If Jesus can bring a dead man to life, get up, take those grave clothes off of him. If Jesus can redeem the prophecy of someone so vile and evil and dark, then on the cross, Jesus can look straight at your death and decay, your scatteredness and your hurts and pains, and look at you and go, get up, you are alive. You are forgiven. Or the plain part of where we started this sermon. A time is coming when you'll feel scattered because of death. You'll leave me all alone, yet I'm not alone, for my Father is with me. But I've told you these things that you might have peace. Because in this world, you're going to have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world. And I think that's good news. And we'll end right there. Please stand for prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you guide us in all your ways, that you guide us to life. Lord, when we are all about darkness, Lord, help us to see that, to repent from it. But Lord, help us to see that even as you can redeem that body of Lazarus, that you can redeem those words of Caiaphas, that you can even redeem us, our sin, and even our own death. Thank you, Jesus.